Welcome to the Formula One Expresso news show from Coffee Corner Motorsport for Beans podcast. I'm your host Terry, and this is the weekly news show where we go through all of the news from the paddock to the podcast via my shed whilst drinking far too many cups of coffee. This is a 30-minute show which will keep you up to date with all the latest of what's going on within the world of Formula One. Now, we are, of course, in the midst of pre-season testing. We're currently on day 2 as I record this, so I won't be touching on any of the testing times or my thoughts on testing in this episode. That episode will be dropping early next week after all of the testing has been completed, and of course I've written my article on what's hot and what's maybe not so hot on the tech side of Formula One, so stay tuned for that one. But with all that in mind, on this week's show, we've got Alpine in their chassis, we've got V10s potentially coming back, we've got Monaco and a 2-stop mandatory strategy, we've got Susie Wolfe and her bid potentially to become an FIA president. That one's still very firmly in the rumour stages. And we've also got Felipe Massa and his court case, and what does it actually mean for Lewis Hamilton and his titles with regards to the 2008 championship. So if all of that takes your fancy, don't forget there is the option at the moment on the screen to hit that follow, like, subscribe, whatever it is available to you on the platform you're listening to it. And let's get into it, because this is the Formula One Expresso news show from Coffee Corner Motorsport for Beans. I'm Terry, I've got my coffee, you've got me for the next 30 minutes. Let's get on with it. Right, we're going to start off with Alpine and their chassis. There's been a lot of talk about this, and I kind of feel it's been overhyped and over-talked about, and we're not kind of really seeing what's going on here. So the news came out, I think it was beginning of last week, that Alpine on their new car will be using their 2024 chassis for the 2025 season. Now, this caused a lot of speculation online as to the reasons why this is. Pure and simple, it's a cost-saving measure, let's be honest about it. That's the reason behind it. And there is a slightly different reason behind this, and this could actually be forward planning by Alpine, not backwards planning, to which it's being related to. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is in line with the cost cap and this is an issue for them and that it's going to hinder them going forward. I don't think it actually is, and here's the reason why. Now, you remember last year, Alpine started the 2024 season with a massively overweight car. It came out of the blocks in testing, first few races, and it was an extremely poor car. It got changed, I think it was around China was when we first saw Esteban Ocon get the new chassis for Alpine, which was a much lighter weight chassis, much better suited for performance, and much clearly a better benchmark and a better platform to take on for the 2024 season. Now, I think that Alpine have actually done quite a sensible thing. We know that the regulations are pretty much the same. We know that they're standard regulations. There are some very, very minor tweaks here. Not a lot at all has changed with regards to the regulations. So I think that personally, from my point of view, Alpine have front-loaded 2025 with their 2024 chassis. And by that, what I mean is they knew they had an issue with their chassis. It was overweight. It was bad for performance. They knew they had to change it. To change a chassis is a big drain on your cost cap. It's huge resources. So I think they've effectively borrowed it from 2025 and put it into 2024 by making sure when they introduced that new lightweight chassis, which was obviously in China to combat that one being overweight, what they did was make sure that that chassis could then serve them into 2025, which in turn would free up money for 2026 development. So whilst there's been a big speculation on this online with people saying it's a bad move, I actually think it's quite a clever move. I don't think that Alpine will be the only ones to do this. I think with a lot of the teams and the chassis, there will be potentially minor tweaks to it. You can see from the liveries this year that the teams have clearly got the weight under control, whereas at the start of last season, we saw a lot of bare carbon in terms of weight saving. We saw Red Bull obviously scrapping parts, paint jobs, rather than parts. They can't scrap parts, can they? But, scrapping paint jobs to their car in exchange for keeping the weight saving on it with regards to the carbon. So they didn't run I think it was their America livery, their one-off livery for the competition for that one. And we're seeing that with the grid a lot more, with the exception of probably Sauber, which has got a lot more carbon fibre on it than I realised from the launch show, actually, after seeing it on track and testing. But it seems like the teams have got this under control. So I don't think Alpine are alone in this. I think they've just been very honest about it by coming out and saying that it is the same chassis. but it isn't the same chassis as what they started 2024 with. It's the chassis they revised and put into place, which was in turn a massive performance boost for the team, certainly for the second half of 2024. Like I say, not all bad news at all. It's not that much of a major issue. It's just something going on. Truth be told, I don't think they're the only team on the grid to do it at all. Right. That's Alpine done and dusted. Lots of speculation again on Franco Colapinto. We're not going to go into that. That'll be the third week in a row, and that would be unfair on Jack Doohan. The one thing I will say is, with regards to performance in testing, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but Jack Doohan put in a absolutely solid performance on the opening day of testing for Alpine, with Oliver Oates certainly singing his praises to the press afterwards, which could only bode well for Jack, who's under some extreme pressure. So V10 sustainable fuels and 2030. This has been muted about by the FIA. I can't decide whether or not this is a crowd pleaser or a genuine bid. And what I mean by that is we all know the journey of sustainable fuels. We all know that in 2026, we're even going to sustainable fuels. We've all seen the great work that Seb's done with some of the older cars, with his Senna McLaren, and obviously with Nigel Williams in terms of running them on sustainable fuels. So we know it's a big factor for Formula One. Now, what this is talking about, having V10 engines coming back, but being run on sustainable fuels. So therefore they are, with regards to the carbon footprint and the net zero, they're still adhering to that goal as such as what they set themselves. We know that there's massive electrification with the 2026 regulations. The regulation, for those who don't know, for engines are due to change again in 2030. The FIA seem to be on this rolling sort of 4-5 year plan with regards to regulations, which gives the team a bit of security under the cost cap, knowing when the next set of regulations are coming. It seems to be something they've been fundamentally given to the teams, which I think is a good thing, to know when the rules are changing. It does, sometimes make for, will people just write it off and wait for the new regulations? There's that risk, I suppose, to it. But ultimately, it's good. It's good for all the actual teams, and it's good for everything that's going on in the world of Formula One to know when the regulations are changed with regards to future planning, knowing how long something's got to last for, knowing how long something is going to be on the grid for. So V10 has been muted about making a comeback. This is due with the noise. There's a lot of concern over the noise. There's some people saying that the noise is still there for 2026 engines. There's some people saying it is toned down. And there's a lot of clamour for the noise from almost like a V10, V8 sort of engine to come back to Formula One, in the sense of that sort of grunt that you hear on the track. One of the biggest criticisms we always hear about Formula E is the noise of the cars. You talk to a lot of people there, say, I've seen it, the racing's good, but I really can't stand the noise of the cars. It is one of the big, I suppose, turn-offs to watching Formula E, is that noise. And I think Formula One are very conscious that with a 50-50 engine in 2026 and a move away from what the cars used to sound like, that actually a move back to a V10 sustainable fuel option in 2030 would actually go down really well with the fans at a time when it feels like the fans aren't really getting a lot at the moment in terms of, things coming their way. Let's be honest about it. So I'm here for it. I think we should try it if we can. If we run it on sustainable fuels and making it more environmentally friendly, then absolutely, why not? I still think there's a lot more Formula One can do with regards to the calendar and how they organise races. I understand some of the demands, place certain races at certain times on the calendar, which is an issue for Formula One and the FIA when they do the calendar, and that makes for tricky situations. But ultimately, I think there's a lot more that could still be done with regards to that move to 2030 net zero that they're trying to do. And to be honest, it seems to have gone a bit quiet. We've lost all the sort of signage around the track. We've lost all the livery on it. It used to be quite a very prominent part of a race weekend to see that logo being muted about, which makes you wonder if we're not where we are, or whether or not actually we're further along. The teams, like I say, are doing great on it. There's a lot of good work going on there. The FIA made it a lot more cost cap beneficial to do stuff sustainable, so it's a way forward. And if we can run V10 engines on sustainable fuel, absolutely, let's do it. It's certainly got my vote. Right, let's go into Monaco becoming a 2-stop mandatory race after the FIA ruling. Now, what this means is you've basically got to use 3 sets of tyres during a dry race. So this doesn't take in effect if the race is deemed a wet race. This is a dry race only. So three sets of tyres and 2 different compounds is what you're going to have to run for. I made my thoughts on this one quite clear. I think that if we're artificially affecting a race, we need to not race there. But we are racing there. Will it make it more exciting? Depends on the rules and how they word it. I can kind of see that every team will just cover every team off, which is my concern with this. And a lot of people have jumped on it straight away and gone, wow, it's amazing, we're going to get great racing? Are we? Or are we just going to get teams covering each other off? I.e., someone's in the lead, someone comes in, someone from second place comes in, the leader follows them in. Is it going to make for a better strategy, or is it just going to make for more pit stops? Because ultimately, that's what it kind of feels to me. I'm not too sure. I heard Bernie Collins talk about it. She was saying that actually a 2-stop is the quickest way around Monaco normally anyway. So most teams would look towards that. Last year had some extreme exceptions to the racing. Yes, it was extremely boring, but it was an extreme race in the sense of what happened and the elements that played a part in it. So is this a knee-jerk reaction to that and to obviously what was a big clamour from the drivers after the race itself going, ultimately this is what it is, and ultimately saying, are you sure this is what we want to do? Because like I say, my issue with this is if we do it on one race, when do we actually go ahead and do it on that one? When do we actually say that it's okay to do that forward, and is it okay to do that for every single race? Because ultimately that's what we're doing. We're manipulating it without actually racing. We're saying that we want a strategy to dictate here. I still think there's more to be done on tyres, like I said. I still think there's more to be done on tyre wear. I know we've got more compounds as such available this year. If you've seen the way they're describing the tyres this year, it seems really baffling. You've got a tyre without a brackets on to tell you what it is, because that's going to really help when a car's going 200 miles an hour. You'll be able to tell exactly what tyres on that car by the fact if it's got brackets on there or not. No, you won't be, will you? So, for me, there's still a lot more to be done on tyres in Formula 1 and a lot more to be done in terms of strategy. I'm not too convinced on 2 mandatory pit stops going to be the way forward, but I could be wrong on this one. We remain to be proven wrong on this one. Let's be honest about that. Right, then we need to talk about Felipe Massa and his court case before we get on to Susie Wolfe and FIA president bids. So, Felipe Massa's court case. Now, for those who don't know, this is to do with Crashgate in 2008, where obviously Renault deliberately crashed a car. Fernando Alonso got the win. Massa ultimately lost out on the championship by a point to Lewis on that final bend in Brazil. And Massa's whole court case is being built up on an interview with Bernie. That's Bernie Ecclestone, not Bernie Collins, before you think that. As it currently stands, so the story as it currently stands, without going too much into Crashgate, is once the FIA validate the results at the end of the season, that's it. The results are in the bag. That's why you don't get crowned a Formula 1 World Champion until the prize giving ceremony. That's the rules of Formula 1. Now, this obviously happened. Now, what, Formula 1 management, the FIA, Bernie, who was obviously in charge of FOM at the time, basically come out and said was they didn't know about Crashgate until after the prize giving ceremony. Now, Bernie, in his interview, kind of alluded to the fact they might have known before. He's now backpedaled on that one, as you'd imagine. But Felipe Massa is basically saying that as they knew, it was a decision taken by all of the management. So that's the FIA, Formula 1 management, and of course Bernie, because he's no longer a part of it, but in his own capacity. And they're saying that ultimately, because they knew about it, they A, did them out of the title, and B, there's a money sort of factor compensation to be paid for that because of the amount of money that Felipe Massa missed out on by not being a Formula 1 World Champion in terms of endorsements and in terms of, just what's going on in the world. By when you're a Formula 1 World Champion, you can negotiate a better contract. He would have had bonuses with Ferrari, I'm sure. He would have been able to do better commercial deals, etc., etc. So this isn't about changing the result. This is about getting monetary compensation currently. Now, the reason I say currently is there is a aim for Felipe Massa more than money. So his answer is if he can get the courts to agree with him that basically the FIA and Formula 1 management and Bernie knew before the prize giving ceremony that Crashgate was actually a big fix, then that makes the prize giving ceremony void because they knew and they covered it up, rather than the current story, which is they didn't find out until after that prize giving ceremony. I think it was in January or something they're saying. So his answer is if he wins this case, that then gives him the evidence to try and then challenge to overturn the 2008 World Championship. So there is a double-edged sword to this court case. It's not just about the money. People seem to be getting confused with the both. Some people saying it's about money. Some people say it's about overturning the championship. Ultimately, it's about both. Let's be honest about it. He's hoping for a wad of cash and the chance then to then take that to a different court to overturn the 2008 championship. Based on that evidence would have been heard in court and the courts would have agreed that it was a cover-up and he was entitled to that money. He's saying, as I was entitled to that money then, I'd then be entitled to that championship then. Of course, you could talk about, teams getting banned from championships over the years. People are saying about, just writing off that race, for example. We've not had that in the past. Normally, when a team's been found guilty of something, that actual team has been taken out of the Constructors' Championship, not that race as such, because, you think back to Spygate, you think back to when Michael Schumacher was penalised by the FIA for that last lap crash in his championship year, where he's actually banned from the championship as such, so he had all his points stripped off him. So they don't tend to do it for just one race and void everything for that race, which is where the argument is. They tend to scrap it for the season, but keep a lot of the results the same way. Now, I'm not too sure on the maths behind that one. Some people are just saying that Felipe Massa is just, a sore loser because ultimately it was his pit stop in that same race which was botched, which ultimately cost him the championship. Over the course of the season, you'll have twos and throws, won't you? Ultimately, there would be moments where Lewis could have won it in that season, and there was moments where Felipe could have won it in that season. That's the way Formula One works. So I kind of get both sides of that argument. Do I think he'll win? I don't. The reason behind that is I think that Formula One management, Bernie Ecclestone and the FIA, it's not very often you see them all team up. This is one occasion when we will see them all team up, let's be honest about it. They've got the most to lose from this. They don't want this to go any further than what it currently is. And ultimately, they're the ones who will lose out most by this being put into place, as in giving Felipe that money. My guess is they've already gone for a kind of throw out of court before he even gets there. I think they'll try a settlement where it'll be, we're not proportioning any blame, we're not admitting any guilt, but we're going to give you a lump sum to keep you quiet. Let's be honest, there's enough money between Bernie Ecclestone and Formula One management and in the FIA's coffer somewhere to pay off Felipe Massa a substantial sum of money. I think that's the aim that they will certainly all want to go for. Whether or not Felipe will take that will ultimately depend on whether this is about money or correcting a wrong as such. Interested to see where this takes. Obviously, it's down to be held in the High Court in October. The reason it's being held in the UK is that's where the paperwork was submitted, so that's why it's held in the UK. Even though obviously the FIA based in France, that's where it's done. So yeah, will it open up? I mean, it could open up a right avenue. If you turn this over, you can go back to championships all over the place. So that's why I don't think there's a huge appetite between Formula One management, FIA, and even Bernie himself for Felipe Massa to win this one. I think ultimately they'll all be quite happy to pay him off, and probably pay him off with quite a substantial amount of damages as such for what's happened. Bernie is in his 90s now. I'm sure they're just going to say he got muddled with his timeline, unless Felipe Massa team's got some evidence that we don't know about, which obviously will come out in court if he has. I hope he has. If he's only got the interview with Bernie, then that kind of feels like it's a bit of a quicksand case, if I'm honest. But it will be interesting to see how this plays out with, of course, the controversies that are going on. A lot of people are saying, would this open up 2021? Potentially it could. So yeah, I don't think it'll get that far. I think it'll either be paid off beforehand, thrown out, or ruled in favour of the FIA, Formula One, and of course Bernie Ecclestone. Like I say, those three together making a formidable team kind of makes you feel that actually it's one of those where they've got so much to lose, not a lot to gain by letting it go to court. So they'll find a way to work together, which should be quite a novelty to see all three parties working together for this one. So that's my thoughts on this. Keep your eye out for that one. October is the date it's penciled in for. But as I said, the three parties involved have already submitted to the court, so they want it thrown out. So it might be a bit sooner we get a bit of news on that one. And then finally, the last part is a slightly controversial part of the podcast. I am going to sip my coffee for this one, because this is the rumours on Susie Wolfe becoming FIA president that I actually heard a while ago, probably about 6 months ago, if I'm honest. So I certainly have been shocked at this. The reason I didn't report at the time is the same reason I haven't really reported on it now, because it is purely in the rumour camp. But I'm going to go into my thoughts on this one, because I've got some thoughts on this one, and they might prove a bit unpopular, but we're going to go with it anyway. So grab your coffee, sit down, strap in, and let's talk Susie Wolfe, FIA president. Okay, so this is a rumour that obviously next year is an election year for the FIA president. So Mohammed Ben Salah at the moment looks like he's going to be re-elected unopposed. There is now talk that there is opposition, and that's going to come from Susie Wolfe. Now, first off, I want to start this off on the bat, because this is always going to be a contentious subject. Now, this is nothing against Susie being female, and this is nothing against Susie not being able to do the job of of FIA president. I think that she could do it. I think that, in terms of her business skills, absolutely. In terms of her heritage, absolutely. I just think that you can't have Susie Wolfe as the FIA president due to the direct conflict of interest with Toto Wolff. And it's as simple as that. And, there's a lot of talk about this online. A lot of people obviously want to see the end of Mohammed Ben Sulayem and his reign as the FIA boss. And I feel they're kind of not seeing what's in front of you here. And ultimately, this is bad for the sport if this happened due to her relationship with Toto. Not because she couldn't do a job, not because she's female. Far from it. Like I said, 5-6 years down the line, absolutely, I welcome it. But for Susie to take control of the FIA, there needs to be some very clear actions that happen well in advance of Susie taking that role. And that is Toto and his businesses within Formula One. Now, I've seen online people saying, well, Toto can step down as team principal. He can, but he would still own 33% of Mercedes-Benz Formula One team. He would still have an active interest in Formula One and, of course, Mercedes' success within the sport. He would still have a vested interest. So that wouldn't work for me, him just stepping down. For Toto to be completely clean and Susie to run as FIA president, Toto would have to sell his entire stake in Mercedes-Benz and also step down as team principal and step away from the sport and have done that for a period of time. So we're not saying here that Susie gets elected and Toto does that, because that's not right either. It needs to have been a clear gap between that happening and then Susie standing for election. If that happens, absolutely, I'm all for it. If that doesn't happen, then I'm not for it. And here's the reason why. You just can't guarantee that there wouldn't be a conflict of interest. You can't guarantee there wouldn't be information sharing. Yes, Susie's got great integrity, absolutely. But ultimately, there would be constant scrutiny, constant questions asked. One controversial decision. What if we had a regulation change and Mercedes get it right and come out of the blocks, absolutely firing, like Red Bull did in the last regulation change, and are dominating the sport? Are we all honestly going to sit there and say that information wasn't passed on between the two, even without any evidence? Of course, that's what the narrative would be. That would be what the talk is. Now, there would be no evidence for it, and it probably wouldn't happen. It would just be that Mercedes got it right. But ultimately, you wouldn't be able to bat that speculation down, and that's bad for the sport. That's bad for business. That's not what we want at all. So whilst I appreciate she could do a great job, you can't control that conflict of interest enough in a position where Susie's current role doesn't impact on Toto being Mercedes' boss. Yeah, I'm totally comfortable with their relationship at the moment and what Susie does with Formula One Academy. If anything, it might benefit the sport, because ultimately having Mercedes on board with Formula One Academy is good for business for Formula One Academy. Let's make no doubts about it. If Mercedes are on board, the chances are a lot of the other teams are on board. Would the same set of fans who are clamouring for Susie to be the FIA president be happy if Christian Horner put Jerry Horner as boss of Formula One management? There would be an absolute outcry about it. Most of those be because I don't think Jerry has a lot of history within motorsports, let's be honest on it, whereas Susie has. I'm not comparing the two. But what I'm saying is the conflict would be the same. We would never go with it. We would all sit here and go, absolutely not. Yet we're supposed to go with this idea. It just doesn't work for me. Yes, there should be a challenge to the FIA president. Absolutely, 100%. There are plenty of other people. Dave Richards, for example, is a prime candidate for someone who could challenge in that capacity. Ross Brawn, sat somewhere fishing, I imagine, somewhere after leaving, obviously, Formula One management. He's a great candidate for this, to go up against Mohammed Ben Sulayem. There are lots of candidates. We could do that. And in that time, if Toto wants to step away from Formula One and then Susie wants to then do a bid at the next round of elections, absolutely, I'm here for it. But until that point happens, we can't do this. It's bad for the sport. It's bad for business. It would lead to too much speculation. It would lead to too much controversy. It would lead to too much ifs, buts and maybes if something happened to go a certain way with regards to anything else. So whilst, yes, challenge is great for the FIA president, yes, I welcome challenge. No, Susie Wolfe isn't the answer on this occasion, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. And I just want to reiterate, this is nothing against Susie being female, and this is certainly nothing against Susie not having the ability to do the job, because actually, I think that she would be great at the job. It's just Toto needs to walk away. I remember that the FIA president doesn't pay. It's more of a role where you could claim back expenses and stuff. That's a lot of money to say to Toto you want to walk away from. It is whole massive influence, not only as a Formula One team, but obviously as an engine supplier within Formula One. That gets them more votes with regards to regulations. And Susie's role at the FIA if she was to become the FIA president, would be directly making the rules to which her husband would then implement within his team. Just take a moment to think about that. You just can't have that within the sport. It's not good for the sport. And yeah, like I say, Toto walks away 5 years down the road, absolutely. Until then, look at Dave Richards, look at Ross Brawn, let's look elsewhere, but let's get a challenge into it in terms of a challenge to Mohammed Ben Sulayem, because I don't think he should be elected unopposed. I think there should be competition for that role, especially given the recent sort of controversies about the FIA. Why wouldn't you welcome a competitor to stand against? Is it rumours? Is it true? It kind of feels like it's being muted as a soundbite. By that I mean it's trying to see if there's a support for it. By announcing it as a rumour, as a leak, it allows people to talk about it. It allows people to go online and comment about it. It allows podcasts like this to talk about it. And it also allows people to talk to people in a position of voting, like the FIA, of whether or not they would consider that. Because as with anything, there will be lots of discussions on whether or not it would be an option or not for a certain set of voters, which would then gain whether or not there's enough support to do it, rather than just putting your name out there and potentially losing by a considerable margin, which is potentially the case at the moment if you announce you're running. So I do think there's a lot of that going on, as a lot of, testing the water to see if there's an appetite for it. And whether or not there's an appetite for it within the FIA, I don't know. All I know is voting within the FIA is very different, because obviously each organisation gets equal votes on it. So no matter the size of your country or no matter the size of your organisation, each vote is equal. And it's a lot of the outlying votes that get you the FIA president role, not the main votes that are predominantly sort of based in Europe, that side of things. Far from it. In fact, you need all those outlying votes. And also, I don't think this late in the day, we're into February now, I don't think this late in the day that it's right to mount a challenge. I don't think that there's enough time for Susie to do a decent election campaign against the FIA president to actually be successful as well, which is a huge part of this also. And what I wouldn't want to see is, I wouldn't want to see a stand, get beaten, and then not stand again. Ultimately, I think take a step back, let Toto take a step back, and then come back into it later on when the time's right. If you need someone in the meantime standing against Mohammed Ben Sulayem, by all means find one. I just don't think that's the right person due to the direct conflicts it would place within the sport and certainly within the teams. I can't imagine there'd be a lot of team principals and team organisations happy with that. Obviously, they don't get the vote, so it doesn't really matter to them. It's the FIA that gets the vote. But even so, there's an element of keeping the Formula 1 teams happy as well, which when you've got Concord negotiations up and coming, when you've got things happening where you need their buy-in for stuff, it just feels like it would be a step in the wrong direction for the FIA to take that role currently. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think about that one in comments, because like I say, we all feel that we want to change. We're all kind of at that point where we would welcome a change. So it'd be interesting to see if some of the names I chucked in there, people who've got an appetite for some of those as well, or do you disagree and go, actually, I think you're wrong. I think that she would do a great job and that she would be able to keep it separate, and that we should be in the dark ages. We have organisations where people who are married to each other, people who are in relationships with each other, work together anyway. So is it actually as bad as what we think? Intrigued to know your thoughts on this one. It's quite a contentious one, let's be honest about it. But that's my thoughts on it. I think currently, not at the moment, but I'm all for it in a few years' time, providing Toto has stepped back. And that is a whistle stop 30 minutes. It feels quick today. I didn't want to do too much. I obviously dropped my podcast last week. I just want to say thank you for that one. I dropped that one about the history of Coffee Corner Motorsport. Been absolutely overwhelmed by the comments on it. As I said at the time, it wasn't one which I felt wholly comfortable doing. I'm glad I did it now. I'm glad some people have found out the story behind Coffee Corner, or at least some of the story behind it, and hopefully a bit of an insight into why I do what I do. I will drop one, like I said, in terms of a podcast with regards to testing and what's going on with there. We know there's a lot of sandbagging, we know there's a lot of cloak and dagger in there, but I'll give you my thoughts on that one in a separate one. And then, of course, I'll be back this time next week with the Formula 1 Expresso news, giving you the weekly roundup before, of course, we then head to the season opener in Australia, which is only a couple of weeks away now. Huge thank you for listening and tuning in once again. A massive thank you to everyone who's subscribed on the YouTube channel. It's now up to over 700, so that's like over 600 subscribers in little over 2 months, which is absolutely phenomenal. For those who don't know, this podcast also appears on YouTube, but appears in a video format. If you're in the car, this is the best way to listen to it. On the podcast, listen to it. But if you happen to be at home and want a video version, it's just the same podcast, just in a video version instead. But for all those who have subscribed to the YouTube channel, I really appreciate that. If you do want to keep up to date with all of the latest in the world of Formula One, as I said at the top of the show, there's a like, a follow, subscribe button. Or, of course, you can check out my website, which is www.coffeecornermotorsport.com, or of course just search at Coffee Corner Motorsport on all of the social media platforms and you'll find me there pretty much on everything nowadays. So appreciate you tuning in. Sorry it's been a bit fast, sorry it feels a bit rushed, but yeah, 30 minutes non-stop Formula 1 news, quickly in a pit stop, and I'll see you all for testing rundown and then Formula 1 Expresso news next week. Catch you soon.